Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you this morning. Very interesting. I wanted to ask a couple questions here about HAARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Several of you at the table have a little bit of a piece here. As you know, this is located up in Alaska. It's currently funded by the Air Force Research Lab. It was formerly funded by the Office of Naval Research. One of the prime customers is DARPA, which is currently running experiments at the facilities here. So questions to several of you this morning. I'm told by the president of the University of Alaska that the Air Force has pulled its support for the facility, and they're taking steps to demolish it or take it down this summer. He's making the argument that there is other opportunities for us, and is trying to find a path where the university might be able to take title to the facility. I'd like to start with you, Dr. Prabhakar. I understand that a lot of folks here on the committee probably don't understand what HAARP does. I think most Alaskans don't really know what HAARP does or why the agency is involved in it. So a very brief explanation, and then a more direct question. Would you be disappointed or would you lose something if HAARP were to go away?
Senator Murkowski, as I think you know, one of our programs has been using the HAARP facility for the research that it's pursuing. And my understanding is that we did get value out of that interaction. The P in DARPA is projects, and we're not in the business of doing the same thing forever. And so very naturally, as we conclude that work, we're going to move on to other topics. So it's not an ongoing need for DARPA, despite the fact that we had actually gotten some good value out of that infrastructure in the past.
Understood. Then to Dr. Walker and Mr. Schaefer then, Dr. Walker, your agency is currently running the facility. I've mentioned that it's our understanding through the president of UAF that the plans are to move forward and demolish the facility this summer. So the question to you is that accurate? Can you explain why? And then perhaps to both you and Mr. Schaefer, is there any benefit in exploring a potential relationship with the University of Alaska to perhaps take over the HAARP?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it, and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there, and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere to be able to actually control it. And but that work has been completed. The Air Force has maintained the site for other government agencies to use for several years now. And with DARPA completing their project, that's our last government customer that we have in the site. We have put out a call government-wide for other agencies that had interest in managing the site or taking it over, and including going out to academia and seeing if there was any interest there. We have gotten interest from the university in Fairbanks. However, the interest we have is that they will run it if we fund it, which is unfortunately in this fiscal environment we're in right now, this is not an area that we have any need for in the future, and don't see that it would be good use of Air Force S&T funds in the future. So our position has been that if there's not somebody who wants to take over the management and the funding of the site, then the Air Force has no future need, and that we do plan to do a dismantle of the system in the future after we make appropriate notifications.
When you say in the future, do you anticipate that it would be this summer then, or would there perhaps be more time for the university to try to figure something out?
We would prefer to start this summer. We would like to get the critical equipment out of the site before the winter. The harsh winter in Alaska does lead to a very costly winterization to maintain the site, and we'd like to avoid that if we can.
Okay.
This is a U.S. Air Force research paper from 1996. And I direct you to the title of the paper, Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear about the military owning the weather, I don't like that, because Yahweh owns the weather. And I think it's blasphemous for them to even suggest such a thing. But nevertheless, that's what this report is talking about. Well, how exactly would this work? Amazingly, the report actually diagrams the whole thing out for us. And this is how it works. What you see up near the top right is all the data coming in. Now, it mentions Gwen here. This is ground wave energy that's reporting what's happening with all of this. You can see the world there. You can see the magnetosphere around the Earth. You can see satellites there. You can see electromagnetic energy. So obviously they're monitoring all of that. They're doing things with all of that. And the information comes into them on their little computer. So what do they do with all that? Well, as you can see here, sync has an arrow that comes down to that computer and a number 1 that says intent. In other words, sync, which is, by the way, commander-in-chief, so that would be the president, says, okay, we have a problem with such and such a country. What are the options that we can do in the natural world to convince them that they ought to join with us in what we're doing? So they take in all this information and they figure out what the possibilities are of what they can do. And you see here 2 wax mod options. Well, that's weather modification options. So that gets sent up to the president. They say, well, in such and such a place, we could induce an earthquake. In such and such a place, the jet stream is in a certain position. We could induce tornadoes. We could induce other kind of weather things. We could cause a drought, whatever. Here's the different choices. This is David Walker. And again, you can find this on YouTube if you want to listen to it. The Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering. So he's one of the top science guys for the Air Force. And he was speaking to a Senate committee in March of 2014 and looking into the future, discussing certain possibilities of how HAARP could be disposed of. And during that rather lengthy Senate discussion, he said this.
The Air Force has gotten great value out of HAARP in the past. We took over from the Navy and managed it and actually did a number of experiment campaigns up there and have finished our work that we're interested in doing up there. We've moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere, which the HAARP was really designed to do, was to inject energy into the ionosphere, be able to actually control it. And but that work has been completed.
This, I think, is a rather amazing statement from a scientist. And he's saying that they're moving on to other ways of managing the ionosphere. So they think that they can manage the ionosphere. Now, please remember, the ionosphere circles the entire globe. If you're talking about managing the ionosphere, you're talking about something with global reach. And he even says here how it works to inject energy into the ionosphere to be able to actually control it.
This U.S. Air Force report graphically outlines the military's desire to exploit and manipulate the weather for the purposes of war by the year 2025. According to one of the most harrowing lines in this report, quote, weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments.
The 2025 report on weather was essentially a military analysis of what could we do, whether it was to create rainfall, create drought conditions. The idea was by 2025 we would be able to manipulate virtually every aspect of weather.
With our deadline of 2025 quickly approaching, the future of weather warfare is cause for concern.